Queen Nzinga, the African queen who defeated the Portuguese. When Portuguese colonizers told an African queen she wasn't worthy of a chair in their presence, she didn't argue. Instead, she ordered one of her servants to become her throne, sitting on his back during the entire negotiation. This power move set the tone for a 40-year war that would change African history forever. This is the story of Queen Nzinga. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba didn't just resist European colonization. She fought it to a standstill. For 4 decades, she outmaneuvered Portuguese armies, forged strategic alliances, and proved that African kingdoms could stand against European empires. She was a brilliant military strategist, a skilled diplomat, and one of the most formidable opponents Portugal ever faced. Yet her story is barely mentioned in most history books. Today, we are fixing that. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed to this channel for more untold African history. Hit that bell icon so you never miss a video. Now, let's talk about the queen who terrified Portuguese colonizers. Early life and context. Nzinga was born around 1583 in the Kingdom of Ndongo, in what is now Angola. This was a critical time in African history. The Portuguese had already established a presence on the coast, and they were expanding inland, hungry for slaves and resources. Her father, Ndongo, was king of Ndongo. The title Angola is where the name Angola comes from. The Portuguese literally named the colony after the local rulers they were trying to conquer. From birth, Nzinga was different. According to legend, she was born with the umbilical cord wrapped around her neck, a sign, in her culture, that she was destined for greatness. Her name, Nzinga, comes from the Kimbundu word kujinga, meaning to twist. Unlike many princesses, Nzinga received military training alongside her brothers. She learned combat, strategy, and statecraft. Her father recognized her intelligence and often included her in political discussions, unusual for a princess at that time. The famous negotiation. Nzinga's defining moment came in 1622, when her brother, who had become king, sent her to negotiate with the Portuguese governor in Luanda. The Portuguese were demanding that Ndongo submit to their authority and provide them with slaves. It was essentially an ultimatum: surrender or face military destruction. When Nzinga arrived for the negotiations, the Portuguese governor deliberately insulted her. While he sat in a chair, she was offered only a floor mat, a clear message that she was beneath him. This is where Nzinga showed her brilliance. She didn't protest or show anger. Instead, she gestured to one of her servants, who immediately got on hands and knees. Nzinga sat on her servant's back as if it were a throne, meeting the governor eye to eye. The message was clear: she would negotiate as an equal, and she would use whatever means necessary to maintain her dignity and power. She negotiated a treaty that temporarily halted Portuguese aggression, though it came with conditions, including Nzinga's conversion to Christianity. She was baptized as Ana de Souza, though many historians believe this was purely strategic. Becoming queen. When her brother died mysteriously in 1626, possibly poisoned, Nzinga claimed the throne. There's historical debate about whether she was involved in his death, but what's certain is that she moved quickly to consolidate power. The Portuguese didn't recognize her authority. They refused to negotiate with a woman and instead backed her nephew as a puppet king. This was their fatal mistake. Nzinga gathered her supporters and went to war. She knew she couldn't defeat the Portuguese in conventional battles; they had superior firearms and armor. So she changed the rules. She employed guerrilla tactics, ambushes, and strategic retreats. She turned the dense Angolan forest into her ally, using terrain that Portuguese soldiers couldn't navigate effectively. When the Portuguese pushed her out of Ndongo, she didn't surrender. Instead, she conquered the neighboring kingdom of Matamba and made it her base of operations. From there, she would wage war for the next 3 decades. Military strategy. Nzinga's military genius lay in her adaptability and strategic thinking. She understood that she was fighting an enemy with better weapons but worse knowledge of the terrain and local politics. She formed alliances with other African kingdoms resisting Portuguese expansion. She even allied with the Dutch, who were competing with Portugal for control of African trade routes. When the Dutch captured Luanda in 1641, Nzinga saw her opportunity and coordinated attacks with them. She also recruited escaped slaves and Portuguese deserters into her army, building a diverse fighting force that understood European tactics but fought with African determination. Her army included an elite female military unit. Nzinga herself led troops into battle well into her 60s, proving her courage repeatedly. She controlled key trade routes, cutting off Portuguese access to slaves and resources. This economic warfare had Portugal's colonial ambitions as much as her military campaigns. One of her most brilliant strategies was constantly moving her capital. The Portuguese could never pin her down long enough to deliver a decisive blow. By the time they reached where she had been, she was somewhere else, attacking their supply lines. Diplomacy and politics. But Nzinga wasn't just a warrior, she was a master diplomat. She understood that military might alone wouldn't defeat the Portuguese. She needed political leverage. She sent envoys to the Vatican, arguing that the Portuguese were violating Christian principles by enslaving fellow Christians. Remember, she had been baptized. This created diplomatic pressure on Portugal from the Catholic Church. She negotiated treaties, broke them when advantageous, and renegotiated from positions of strength. The Portuguese never knew if they were at war or at peace with her, and that uncertainty gave her power. She also carefully managed internal politics, balancing different ethnic groups and factions within her kingdom. Her legitimacy as a female ruler was constantly challenged, but she maintained control through a combination of strategic marriages, military victories, and political acumen. Later years and legacy. In 1657, after decades of warfare, Nzinga finally signed a lasting peace treaty with Portugal. She was in her 70s, and both sides were exhausted. The treaty recognized her sovereignty over Matamba and parts of Ndongo. The Portuguese couldn't defeat her, so they settled for coexistence. This was an extraordinary achievement, an African kingdom maintaining independence against European colonial power. Nzinga died in 1663 at approximately 80 years old, still ruling her kingdom. She had resisted Portuguese colonization for 40 years, longer than most African rulers who faced European aggression. After her death, the Portuguese gradually expanded their control over the region. Without Nzinga's military genius and diplomatic skill, the kingdoms of Angola couldn't maintain their resistance. But her legacy lived on. She became a symbol of resistance against colonialism, not just in Angola but throughout Africa. During the Angolan independence movement in the 20th century, freedom fighters invoked her name and drew inspiration from her. Her struggle. Why do her story matters? Today, Queen Nzinga is celebrated as a national hero in Angola. There are statues, streets, and schools named after her. She appears on currency and in textbooks. But outside Africa, her story remains largely unknown. Why? Because acknowledging Nzinga means acknowledging uncomfortable truths about colonialism. It means admitting that Africans fiercely resisted European invasion. It means recognizing that African kingdoms had sophisticated military strategies and diplomatic systems. It means accepting that colonialism wasn't some inevitable march of progress but a brutal conquest that faced serious opposition. Nzinga's story destroys the myth that Africans passively accepted colonial rule. She proves that African leaders were capable, strategic, and powerful, and that it took centuries of military force to subjugate the continent. Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba fought the Portuguese Empire to a standstill for 40 years. She was a warrior, a diplomat, and a survivor who refused to let her kingdom fall without a fight. Her story is one of resistance, brilliance, and unbreakable will. It's a story that deserves to be told alongside any European monarch or military leader. If you want to hear more stories like this, African history that schools ignore, make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Hit the notification bell, and drop a comment telling me what other African historical figures I should cover. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.